Morning guys, it's Brent with Lykins Motorsports. We did a video last week on a little bit of camshaft talk and you guys seemed to like that quite a bit. We had a good amount of views on that particular video. So I thought that I would do a little bit more of that for this week and get into a little bit more cam discussion. So first we're going to start off with a couple of emails that I have received and we'll talk about those emails. So for the most part, guys email me with a cam recommendation form and have intentions of buying cams. Some guys, a very small percentage, email me and get a cam recommendation and then want to argue about it. So I'm not going to include any names or any email addresses or anything like that. My intent is not to talk down to anybody or embarrass anybody or anything like that. And I certainly don't want to give that kind of attitude, show that kind of attitude across the channel because it doesn't do anything. But so I'll show a couple of emails that I have received and just talk about why I answered the way that I answered on some of these emails. So in this first email, a gentleman wanted a cam recommendation for his engine. I can't remember the engine family, but he filled out his form and sent it to me, and I gave him what I thought would be a nice cam based off of the experiences and dyno testing that I've done over the past 15 years or so, and I gave this gentleman a recommendation, and the lift was approaching the 600 thousandths lift mark. And what I've noticed over the years is that the older generation, the guys that were hot rodding in the 60s and 70s, a 600 lift cam looks absolutely huge to them, and it would almost be like you're saying, we're going to open this valve an inch. So I get a lot of kickback from guys when they see 580, 600 lift, 630 lift, when in the technology that we have today, that's not a lot of lift. And with the valve springs and the valve train that we have and the cam lobes that we use, that is generally a pretty conservative amount of lift for a cam. So if you get a cam from me, you'll probably see that most of my cams, street cams anyway, are somewhere around the 580 to 650 mark. And those work really, really well on the street. They don't require a lot of spring load, and they do their job well. So this particular customer or potential customer, he ended up not buying a cam from me. He didn't like what I told him, but he was fixated on the lift and wanted to know if I could knock that lift down to a lower number. And in my mind, when he asked this, I'm thinking, okay, he's got his head set up for a specific coil bind clearance, and I'm gonna ask why he wants that amount of lift, just in case he doesn't want to go through resetting up his heads or anything like that. But his reply was that he wanted a mild cam and he didn't want anything that was radical or sounded radical or anything like that. So that's where this video kind of comes into play. Lift does not play into sound or how radical a cam is or how radical it makes your vehicle. Lift is just lift. We're just opening the valve a specific amount. The two determinations that I use for valve lift are how well your heads do at a specific amount of lift. And um, obviously, we don't want to get into cam lobe profiles where you have a combination of high duration and high lift where it would require a lot of valve spring. But as far as lift goes, to be straight up honest, it's one of the last things that I look at when I choose cam lobes. When I do choose those cam lobes, I am looking at flow numbers, and if I don't have a particular cylinder head here where I have flowed it or have data on it, then I will use the manufacturer's flow chart or a website such as Stan Weiss's website where those flow numbers are available. Okay, so here's another email that was sent to me, and I blacked out some of the comments that were made. Again, I'm not in this to embarrass anybody or anything like that, but I'm going to use this email to this gentleman chose not to buy a cam from me as well, not just because we couldn't see eye to eye on the specs, but I basically said I don't have much or pretty much any experience with this particular engine family. So I'm not familiar with reverse cooling small block Chevrolets or anything like that. But he did a good job of listing a lot of information, and you can see the information that he gave. It's a 383 small block Chevrolet, an LT1 engine, such as what you would find in the first, what I would call the first generation Z28 Camaros. And with that being said, the first generation to me would have been what I was seeing in high school, which is 93, 94, 95, that newer body style. So that's kind of what I have in mind. But it's a 383. He included how long of a rod he was using. He didn't include the bore and stroke, but I pretty much know, I think a 383 is generally a 4030 bore size with a 375 stroke, something like that. Compression ratio was 11.5. He gave me his quench distance or piston to head clearance, which 32 thousandths. Generally don't like to go that small. I have built engines purposely to test quench distances, and when I got down to around 35, 36 thousandths, the pistons were being wiped clean just from getting really close to the heads. So I don't choose to go down that low. He's going to use some AFR 210cc heads with a 64cc chamber, and it's a very good cylinder head. I am an AFR dealer, love their stuff, use it tremendously often if I can. He's wanting a 6,500 RPM peak horsepower. So let's just talk about that for a second. 6,500 peak horsepower RPM would generally generate something like a 7,000, 7,100 shift point. And if you look down below, he's running a Magnum T56 with a 266 first gear, which is a really high first gear ratio. And pair that with a 350 rear end gear, you'd have kind of a hard time getting the car going with a higher peak cam. Look a little bit further down, he said he wants a close duration cam pattern. So by that, I kind of understood that he wanted something, not a single pattern with both the intake and exhaust durations the same, but maybe a few degrees apart from each other. He likes a 104 center line, and he likes a 106 lobe separation angle. And the heads, he says, will love 650 to 660 lift, which they may. And we'll take a look at the website here in a second, and we'll see what the heads would pretty much like in terms of camshaft specs. So let's go to the AFR website. Alright, so we're on AFR's website. You go to airflowresearch.com, and I'm on the small block Chevrolet side of things, and I'm pulling up the head that he wanted to use, the 210cc small block Chevrolet cylinder head. Let's scroll down here and look at a couple different things. So I'm going to keep his email open on my phone while I look at this website. So he is halfway correct in saying that the heads will have 650 to 660 lift because they were flowed to that point and the flow numbers keep going up. So at this 500 lift mark, we got 285, which is really good for a 500 lift number. At 600 lift, we're at 309, 650, we're going to 311. So he was wanting a hydraulic roller, and it's pretty common to run 630, 650 lift with a hydraulic roller. So I'm in full agreement that the heads would probably take full advantage of that. If it were on a pretty racy hydraulic roller cam, we may even go up to 700 lift, just because you may want your lift numbers to encapsulate that peak flow number. And remember that your valve is opening and closing, so you're going to pass that 650 lift opening, and you're going to open the valve as far as you're going to open it, and then you're going to pass it on the way back down. So it's good to overlap your lift a little bit. Now, what I do not agree with is, first, there's a couple things I don't agree with, and I explained these things in an email to him, and it really made him mad. So I'm not for sure why that happened, but I will say that engine building or anything regarding engines tends to bring out egos in men. So I see where that could happen. But his comment about he wants a close duration cam pattern. Here's why you do not want a close duration cam pattern. We'll pick out this 600 lift number. The intake flow is 309 at 600. The exhaust flow is 220 at 600. If I divide 220 by 309, I'm at 71%. Okay, that's not really a good exhaust, an intake to exhaust flow ratio. If we were to see 80, 85, yeah, we could go with more of a closer duration cam, as long as we weren't trying to turn it a whole lot of RPM. The more RPM that you turn, the bigger the split that you want. The smaller of that ratio, so I said we were at 71%, the smaller that number is, generally the more split you want in your intake and exhaust duration. 71%, if I were doing a cam for this, I would be probably somewhere around 8 to 10 degree split. I'm not going to tell you anything that I haven't seen with my own eyes, experimented with, tried, and on this sort of thing, the intake exhaust flow ratios, I have done dyno testing out the wazoo, okay, with the same engine, try different cams, try different split, and each time I've done that with poor intake exhaust flow ratios, the more I split it to a certain point, the more split, the more horsepower I made. So it's very apparent on the dyno. So, a lot of you Ford guys, exhaust port stinks, okay? And I'm a Ford guy, but you call it how you see it. So if you're buying a Ford cam from me, you will see a lot of my Ford cams 8, 10, 12, 15 degree split, okay? So that's the first thing that I disagreed with. Okay, so the second thing that flagged me in his email was he wanted a 106 lobe separation angle. So this is going to be the major point of this video. You cannot predetermine the lobe separation angle before you start looking at other specs. The lobe separation angle is basically a result. It's not an input. And I'm not going to go through, and it would take me hours to explain all this, but you can't come into a cam saying, I want my cam to be, a 110 lobe separation angle, without looking at other specs first. So I'm going to pull open, let's see here. So this is a Comp Cams catalog. This is their shelf cams. Comp, I love Comp Cams. They do probably 95% of my cam grinding for me, and they have probably the most extensive Lobe catalog of any of the cam companies. And they just make a whole lot of cams. Their checking quality is good. Every cam that they spit out is checked on an AdCold machine for quality. And I'm a big Comp Cams fan. But when we look through their catalog for cams, we're on the 351 Cleveland, the Cleveland page here. You have to remember that these are universal cams, and guys look through these catalogs just like this, and if you look down at this Magnum flat tappet cam and you look at the notes, street machines, street strip, that sort of thing, and you look over at the lobe separation angle, 110, 110, 110, 110. You drop down a little bit lower. We're looking at drag race cams. And then you look over the lobe separation angle, 108. You look down further, oval track, 106 lobe separation angle. Guys get used to looking at those. And then they are automatically in the school of thought that 110 is a street cam, a 108 is a drag race cam, a 106 is an oval track, circle track cam. And we look down through here, see if we can find some of the EFI stuff. I'm probably going the wrong direction because, okay, yeah, right here, extreme energy computer controlled hydraulic flat tappet. It's a 114. So and then guys get to thinking, oh, if I have EFI, then I'm going to want a really wide lobe separation angle. So here is the Cliff Notes version of why you don't pick the lobe separation angle first. And I'm going to pop open my calculator. We're going to go to the cam timing and overlap calculator part. This is one of the tools that I use to do some math when I'm checking out your cam if you're emailing me. And we're going to look at two different lobes, okay? So both of these lobes have a 244 at 50 thousandths duration intake lobe and a 252 at 50 thousandths duration exhaust lobe. So if you were to just look at the 50 thousandths durations, you would say, hey, this is the same cam. But the advertised durations are miles apart. So let's throw some numbers in here. I'm gonna go with one lobe first. It's a 294, 302 advertised duration, and again 244, 252 at 50. I'm gonna just say, hey, this is gonna be a street cam. Say you're looking through the catalog and you're thinking, okay, I want a street cam. Most of these street cams in the catalogs are 110 lobe separation angle, so I want to put in 110. And all these cams are universal, and they have 4 degrees of advance ground into them, so I'm going to put it on a 106. When I hit this calculate button, it's going to spit out the valve events, and it's going to spit out the degrees of overlap based on your seat timing. Overlap is so extremely important, and a lot of my calculations are based off of overlap. Overlap means when the valves are open at the same time, your intake valve and your exhaust valve, if they're open at the same time, for how many degrees. You look at that because there's a specific number where you don't make manifold vacuum, so you can't run power brakes. Or if you have a Cougar or a Corvette with pop-up headlights that work off a vacuum, your headlights ain't going to work. So you need to be looking at overlap, because that controls, that's one of the things that controls the amount of manifold vacuum you're going to make. For older cylinder heads, so factory Ford stuff, think 60s and 70s, okay? FE low riser, medium riser, Cobra Jet heads, tunnel port heads, Cleveland 4-barrel heads, that sort of thing. Those heads like a lot of overlap because the ports are bigger than modern cylinder heads. Not so much on the low riser stuff, medium riser stuff. When I say this, I'm really thinking of tunnel ports and Cleveland heads and that sort of thing, where you can almost fit your fist down in an intake port. So overlap is very important there, because when both valves are open at the same time, you can use the exhaust port and your header and your exhaust to help scavenge, which means you're pulling in the intake charge and cramming that cylinder full of air fuel charge. Modern cylinder heads don't need that much overlap because they're very efficient. Alright, so let's go back to our cam timing calculator here, and we're looking at 78 degrees of overlap. Okay, so if I were to just think of somebody that's not used to specking cams, and they just think, I want a 110 lobe separation because I think that's a street cam. You're going to be kind of rudely awakened when you put this cam with 78 degrees of overlap in, and maybe you have a really efficient modern cylinder head, and you end up pulling a lot of the power and pushing it right out the exhaust without converting it over to a combustible air fuel charge. Or you may not have any manifold vacuum at all, like what we discussed earlier. So this exercise, okay, I'm about to do the next part of the exercise. I hope you're sticking with me. So this was a particular Lobe that I picked out of a comp catalog. Okay, now remember what I said. The 50 thousandths durations are 244 and 252. There is another Lobe in the comp catalog. Okay, again, it's 244, 252 at 50. But the advertised durations are 316 and 324. I'm keeping that 110 lobe separation the same. I'm not changing it. When I hit this calculate button, look what the overlap does. So 100 degrees of overlap. Nobody in this world needs 100 degrees of overlap for a 383 small block Chevrolet. So just as a comparison, my 550 or 60 cubic inch big block Ford pulling motors that turn 9,000 RPM and make 1,200 horsepower have less than 100 degrees of overlap. So again, this is just an exercise. You can't pull lobe separation angles out of the air without looking at all of the other specs. So to blindly approach somebody and say, I want this lobe separation angle, it just doesn't work that way. So the way that this email went, I just couldn't come to the terms of what he wanted in terms of lobe separation angle and intake center line being chosen before the rest of the cam specs were chosen. It just doesn't work like that. So he didn't like what I said, offered up his argument, told him that he wasn't interested in doing business with me, and that was that. So that happens sometimes. I have a lot of good customers who trust me, and they come to me in the first place. So arguing just really doesn't make much sense to me. You may not agree with me, but arguing, not feeling that. So let's talk about Eric Weingartner's camshaft test or the challenge. He currently has my cam. He's had it for a couple weeks. I pulled some strings at comp and had them knock it out in literally 2 days, and I had it to him. I ordered it on Monday morning. He had it by Thursday. So I have zero LS engine experience. Okay, well, let me take that back. I built a long block for a guy. That was so long ago. So in terms of LS stuff, I'm just going to say that I have zero experience. I'm not familiar with the different lifters. I'm not familiar with how rigid the valve train is. I know Eric was saying he was going to use a 5/16 80 wall push rod. That can pose some problems if you use an aggressive lobe at higher RPM. So, I had a campground, and I'm not going to give the specs right now. That'll come out in the tabloids later on. But based off of the head flow numbers, based off of the displacement, the compression ratio, where I wanted the peak to be, so he's going 4,000 to 7,000. You really don't want the cam to peak at 7,000. You really want it to peak at like 67, 6,800 and carry it so that you get more average horsepower and torque. So I did the best I could. I really don't mind putting myself out there. Selling cams is not my primary business. I'm not somebody like Mike Jones or David Vizard, who really have put their names out there as far as being cam experts, and I can understand why they don't want to enter or didn't enter. If something happens and they come in midway down the pack or whatever, it could really hurt their reputation, and I get that. I'm doing this for the data, so this is cheaper to me than me building a dyno mule and doing it myself. Okay, so for the $100 entry fee, that's stupid cheap. And even if you look at the cost of the camshaft plus the $100 entry fee, it's still stupid cheap. I can't go and spend a couple days on the dyno for that. So this is good data for me. I probably won't be selling a ton of LS cams, but it kind of pours over into other engine families. And I understand that an engine is an air pump, but I also understand that each family has their own quirks. Okay, LS engines have their own quirks. Like I said, I'm not familiar with Cadillac lifters. I don't know if they pump down easily under load. I don't know. I don't know how rigid the rocker arms are. I don't know how rigid the push rods are in comparison to the deck height. I just don't know. So that's where I've shot in the dark. And what I did was pick the middle of the road lobe in terms of aggression. I'm not trying to overpower the valve train, and I don't want it to be a little sissy cam either, okay, that doesn't make power. So it'll all come out in the wash. You all wish me luck, and we'll see how it goes. So that's that, guys, and we'll see how everything goes. I'm trying to get out in the shop. Feeling a little bit better today with my back, so I may get out and get some stuff done. I did receive a cam in for our small block Ford tunnel port engine. It is a billet core flat tappet. I may do a video on that tomorrow, just so you can see what that's what all's involved with that. But hope you guys are having a great week, and stay tuned for more videos. If you're not subscribed, please do that so that you don't miss out. And you don't miss out, and I get more views, and it helps support the channel. So, it's a win-win for everybody. Hope you guys have a good weekend, and I will see you soon.